I would never really say NXT's dying. I would just say it's going through exactly what I felt like it was gonna have to go through eventually. That like Ring of Honor had to go through, Impact has to go through, even WWE itself has to go through this. You have to realize that eventually your stars have to leave. No star can stay forever. So eventually, Johnny Gargano is going to have to go. Tommaso Ciampa is going to have to leave. The thing with having a main roster is good and bad when it comes to things like this. The good thing is you don't have to just straight up lose a wrestler. You don't have to just straight up fire or release for any specific reasons because they're not fitting a certain thing. I know that WWE is doing it, but the thing of the matter is that you don't have to. You can have a giant moment, and the crowds are back now, so it's even better for us to eventually have a Johnny Gargano. Johnny Gargano. I know his wife is pregnant, so I wouldn't expect him to debut at the moment. If so, I would expect him to do it after the birth of his child, if you want me to be honest. And I think that would be better for him. Because I do expect him to want to spend time with his pregnant wife. And after having a baby, I do expect for him to probably ask for just even an extra 2 to 3 more months just to spend time with the baby, if you want me to be honest. But the thing with all of this is I can see so many good things happening if NXT didn't really poke too much into things. Here's the thing. Let's talk about one thing, and this may be kind of long. I don't mean for it to be, but it'll be kind of long, and this is just the intro, may I add. Let's talk about NXT, in particular stable. Let's talk about, when I say stable, I mean stables in NXT. I don't really think a lot of their stables are long lasting. Why? Because I believe their stables are just they're like the equivalent to playing WWE 2K. Or just playing the WWE game. You make a stable that just sounds pretty cool, that looks pretty cool, with wrestlers that some of us know, some of us don't know. And you have them, you have the golden one, the stable's supposed to be normally a 3-man stable, it probably could be more. I think a 3-man stable has a simple rule premise. You have one who's able to win the main title. You have 2 who can win the tag titles. It's a simple premise, very simple premise. But when you add another man to the stable, what role does he fit? Not only that, how do they gel with the crowd? Do they gel well with the crowd? Does no one care about them? Does everyone have a pop for them? People don't care, people do care. That's the questions that a lot of people ask about certain things. Because the thing of the matter is that if you're going to make something, you have to give it your all, of course. So you can't just do anything like this. You're playing with people's lives at this point. That's basically what it kind of comes across after a while. Because if you're the biggest source of money that they're getting, of course I'm expecting from someone like me who's just the crowd that's just watching this for my entertainment, and that gets to eventually watch other kids, basically, because to have like other kids basically look at these guys and be like, oh my gosh, they're my hero and all that. I don't know, give them a reason to be like that. And this is only for stables. Let's talk about individual stars. You have stars who can be going for titles. You have those who are just good at what they do that don't need a title to make them, to even come close to boosting them. You have those who are legitimate threats, those who are the fan favorites, those who are the evil heels and the bad guys of the gang and everything like that. You have to understand it from that point of view. And how would they go from a longer term, not just in 1 year? Look at how they would be in the next 5 years. Do you see that character still staying the same and able to just well with after winning and losing, winning a title or not having the title or whatever? That's oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm finna go get him. But that's how I'm looking at him, is that you have to be able to look at it in that kind of aspect. If you do if you do, or you are able to let the stars basically shine, let them shine. If you can't let them shine, then you shouldn't have the stars, in my personal opinion. I do believe that a lot of people. Yes, I know. I saw it when I put them in. I forgot to get it. You have to let the stars shine, and you have to let the stars also get big so they can give you the profit that you want from them. Otherwise, they won't be able to give you a profit. Can you give me a sponge, please? Give me a sponge. But if you can't give if you cannot give the stars time to shine, then there's no point in having the stars. There's no point in having the brand. But because it is NXT, I don't really think NXT is dying. I don't think it's dead either. I believe NXT is in the shape where it's losing some stars, and these stars have to go eventually. Yes, they have a main roster, and yes, they have other things that they maybe could do, but after a while, maybe they still have a good 7 or 3 or something years left in them to be able to go one more time. And do they really want to stick to NXT and purely NXT? Possibly. I think that if it was up to me, I would. I probably wouldn't go to the main roster. Why? Because I probably wouldn't be able to adjust well if I'm so used to how NXT is. Because let's be real. Someone from Ring of Honor, you could pick them straight out of Ring of Honor and drop them in NXT. Thank you. And, you know, everything works pretty good. Can you give me the spray? The spray bottle. But you know, with things like that, you get to they get to shine. That's all I'm really saying. And yes, I've been talking for a good while, but it's because it's true, and that's how I see it. They're going to eventually go through a rough patch. Right now they're trying to make it mesh, but Johnny Gargano has to go. Tommaso Ciampa has to go. Adam Cole has to go. Bobby Fish is eventually going to have to. Kyle O'Reilly is going to have to go. All these wrestlers from alumni, whatever you want to call them, have to go eventually. The longer that they stay would be just, after a while, they'll lose the interest that they have with the crowd because no one cares for them to be there anymore. They're eventually going to run into that brick wall, so might as well let them go or move them up quickly. But that's just my thing.
Last Friday, WWE unfortunately released 13 NXT stars, and it shocked many wrestling fans across the world. Shortly after that...
What? I literally just started.
It was reported that NXT was going to experience some drastic changes to the presentation and the talents. We haven't seen the production changes yet, but Vince McMahon wants the brand to focus on taller and bigger wrestlers that are under 30 years old who have more charisma. Whether you believe this is for the better or not, I think we can all admit it and say that NXT needed to blow it up. The brand has not felt the same for quite some time now, and I thought that the show's been dead for over a year now. It's uninteresting, and I don't really care about many of the characters on the show right now. I believe this is a much-needed transformation. They are also looking to sign talent that could become huge charismatic stars on the main roster, and I think the days of work rate wrestlers are gone. That is probably for the better in my opinion, because at the end of the day, wrestling is about the story and the characters, and NXT lost focus of that, and they desperately needed this. And all of this begs the question, what ruined NXT? Well, in today's video, we're going to take a look at the exact moment when I believe NXT was ruined, and without further ado, let's get right into the video. For those of you who forgot, NXT originally started off as a reality show. WWE hired a handful of talent that wanted to be wrestlers and would make them compete in some of the most bizarre challenges, mini-games, and promo battles. This format of NXT would only last a couple of years for a total of 5 seasons, and it's honestly easy to distinguish this as the worst version of NXT. Although some great wrestlers did come out of this time from NXT, I don't think it was a big success. WWE realized it as well and decided to have a complete overhaul of NXT. 2012 is when we would see that totally different version of NXT. Triple H and Dusty Rhodes took over the brand and made it their mission to create the stars of tomorrow, and this was a really special time for NXT because they actually succeeded. WWE had an incredible pool of talent, names like Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Big E, Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Jason Jordan were a part of the brand in 2012, and as you can clearly see, it was stacked.
Yeah, Jason Jordan.
In 2013, new names surfaced on the brand as well as the previous wrestlers were now called up to the main roster, and this is when Sami Zayn, Tyson Kidd, Neville, Xavier Woods, and others showed up to entertain some fans while preparing themselves for either Raw or SmackDown. 2014 saw the debut of Kevin Owens and Finn Balor. On top of that, this was also the beginning of the women's revolution. The four horsewomen began to take women's wrestling serious again, and Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Bayley were all getting ready to take over the main roster and change the complete game for the women. The beautiful thing about this era of NXT was that these wrestlers embraced their short time on the brand because they were hungry to get to the big stage of either Raw or SmackDown. Many of these superstars also credit Dusty Rhodes for their success. He was such a huge piece of NXT at this time. Unfortunately, though, this era came to an end when Dusty passed away. Changes were made and the brand shifted to a new direction.
I'm sorry, let's talk about the old era, shall we? The old era was actually relatively good in my personal opinion. Was it worth the time spent? Yes. Will it be missed? Yes. But I mean, like I said, those stars have to go, as I said in the previous video. Oh, wait, no, that was this video. Ha, that's funny.
After 2015, the new direction that NXT took was signing a ton of international stars that made a big name for themselves outside of the WWE, and Shinsuke Nakamura was easily the biggest name that came from New Japan. That changed everything for NXT. It was a huge signing. Then you also had Samoa Joe, who was a top star in NXT at this time, and Bobby Roode would eventually also sign with NXT and later become the NXT World Champion. These were three NXT champions from 2016 through 2017. I call it the old era because a lot of these guys were a bit older than what we expected in NXT in the prior years. Each of them were in their mid-30s at the time. It was an interesting change because the entire point of NXT was to create fresh and young stars, but they...
I think the thing was that, yeah, it succeeded in what it wanted to do, but I think that they eventually have to leave the nest and they have to have someone to fill up that blank. They're going to eventually run into that brick wall. Everyone runs into it. NXT's time hasn't hit yet, but it's slowly starting. They have some good stars, yes. They have some okay stars. They have some stars that are a little bit, okay, I guess you can make this a star. I guess you can.
Things were a bit different here. Triple H's approach at this time was signing veterans and keeping them for a bit before sending them to the main roster. It was a bit strange, but I thought it was a fun time, and we also saw the rise of Bayley and also had some classic tag team matches with DIY and the Revival.
They took over. That's all you can really say. They took over and they did it very well.
And now we head over to the Undisputed Era. This is obviously named after the Undisputed Era because I like to believe that they were always the major focus of NXT around this time, despite not necessarily being in the main event title picture. They were always in important feuds from 2017 through 2020, and they pretty much main evented War Games almost every year. In my opinion, this was one of the strongest times in NXT because the talent was unbelievable. You had guys like Adam Cole, the Velveteen Dream, before he found out that he was a creep. EC3.
That was allegedly. Allegedly, calm down.
Ricochet, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Aleister Black, and Pete Dunne. Each week, these guys would give us some of the most entertaining...
Wait, was it real? I thought it was fake. I don't care anymore.
matches, and the programs and the storylines were good as well. They weren't anything over the top, but it was interesting nonetheless. The takeover pay-per-views were so good that it was hard for the main roster to even compete with them. I loved almost every second of this NXT era. However, there were problems that began to arise. The wrestling matches were getting a bit too long, and each of them kind of felt the same. You didn't have a different story that was being told throughout the nights. The actual talent also refused to get called up to the main roster, and they preferred to be at NXT, even though they made less money with the brand. Rather than having fresh faces every few months, we were stuck with a majority of these wrestlers for a couple of years. This was slowly the beginning of the downfall of NXT. However, most of these problems weren't exposed yet because it was still an hour-long show on the
I will say this for NXT. Yes, that is a problem. Even still to this day, I still think it's a mad problem of having extremely long matches. I'm not saying that you have to put on a 12-minute classic match, but I am saying that you don't need to put on a 40-minute classic match every 5 seconds.
WWE Network. Unfortunately, these problems began to become more clear once NXT went from a 1-hour program on the WWE Network to a 2-hour show on USA Network to compete with AEW.
This isn't what ruined it. What ruined it to me personally, I'm sorry, let me restate. This isn't what ruined it. What ruined it was afterwise. It's not because they used it for it, because it was legitimately seen as a threat to it. I think the problem came in very early on, even before then. The problem to me was, well, let me speak on multiple problems. The problem wasn't just the talent not wanting to go. It was the overuse of that said talent. The talent eventually started to dry up, and we still consume so much of it that now we're kind of tired of seeing Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, and the rest be in NXT. We want to see them go somewhere else. They can't do anything new anymore. They really are at the worst part, and they don't have really anyone else to really lean off of. Well, they probably do. I mean, they do. Pete Dunne could really be a threat, and just let that man get that NXT title reign. Let him get it. I promise you he would be a legitimate threat.
NXT was ruined the minute they tried to focus on outperforming AEW. The imaginary Wednesday Night War is the worst thing that ever happened to NXT. This is when things only got worse. The show was constantly trying to counter-program AEW rather than focusing on their own storylines. They did not have enough talent to keep things fresh and entertaining for 2 hours. And then Vince McMahon began to get more and more control of NXT in hopes of taking away the ratings from AEW. The USA Network also had influence on the show as well, so it seems like Triple H lost a lot of freedom and control. And let me make this very clear, NXT was still kind of good in the beginning of this time, however, it was not sustainable and therefore it did not last long. The bridge was slowly burning, and it started because of AEW and trying to compete with that promotion. Things got even worse once the pandemic started. NXT really took an even bigger hit because of that. The quality of the show dropped immensely and it never recovered. Hopefully, Vince McMahon does save it and these new changes are promising, but until then, I will say that NXT is ruined.
I do believe NXT can be saved, but I just think that it's going to take a little bit more time, because looking at what's currently going on at the moment, no, I don't believe that it's going to be saved in a matter of days. I do say that we still have good moments of if you like NXT, still have good moments, but overall they still need help. But yeah, it's not what it used to be. Yes, I wouldn't say it's the best that it used to be. It's not in the best version either. It's just okay, cool. Well, that's pretty much it for me. Enjoy, y'all.